Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stili Charalambous, for those of you who didn't sit in on the previous panel. We're going to be talking about an overview of investment opportunities in South Africa with this panel. We're also going to try and make up a little bit of time, and we're also going to fly through some of the introductions so we can get into the meaty stuff. I'm going to start with Julia on the far left to please do a very quick introduction. And also maybe talk a little bit about the problem that your organization is trying to solve, how you're trying to create value, and what that means for opportunity in and around the space that you're in.
Thanks, Stili, and wonderful to see you all here. Welcome to the South African panel. My name is Julia Price. I am the founder and director of an investment company called Linear Capital. Based in South Africa, we are a revenue-based financing company, and we specialize in providing growth capital to small and growing businesses while preserving equity in the hands of founders. And this is really important because we see that the capital options for African founders are really debt and equity, debt being largely unavailable and equity being highly dilutive and expensive. So looking to solve that problem predominantly for women founders and underrepresented founders through revenue-based finance in South Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Maybe we can just move across to the right and go that way.
Good afternoon to everybody. As the slide says, I'm not Mamelo, who's on this. My name is Philippe Vogelaar. I work closely with Mamelo, but here in London, at a company called Vodafone, which has about 50 million clients in South Africa. The type of issue we are trying to solve is how to make sure that everybody has access to the same type of services across the continent, which basically implies to have fiber, towers, devices, services, and energy to power the whole lot. So that's what we are working on.
Sharon?
Thank you. Afternoon now. Sharon Constanson. I am chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, which is based here in the UK. The most important thing that we are focused on as a chamber is to provide a home for South Africans out of South Africa, and we do that through the South African Chamber here in the UK and the network of South African chambers across the globe, and look to work as a collective unit of camaraderie and fellowship. More specifically, though, is the Chamber's mandate is to promote trade and investment in South Africa. So we help companies go into South Africa, we help companies come out of South Africa, and we ensure that the import-export flow and investment flows work between the two countries. So we are there as a facilitator, supporter, educator, and we spend a lot of our time being relevant to South Africans through in-person meetings and through global webinars and through our chapters being on the ground in South Africa and here in the UK, Crown Dependencies, and a few other places in the world as well. So we're here for South Africans.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Planet 42, which is a car subscription company. So what we do is we buy second-hand cars and we rent them out to people that we believe are unfairly ignored by the South African banks. So we democratize mobility. We bought about 14,000 cars so far for South Africans who otherwise would not have a personal car.
Eric, you're from Estonia originally, which is considered one of the...
What gave me away?
one of the most innovative countries in the world. I mean, a lot of hugely successful and massively innovative companies coming out, yet you choose to be in South Africa. What is the appeal of the country or the environment that brought you there?
Well, Estonia has done really well after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So in 30 years, you know, it's one of the most innovative countries in the world, the first truly digital society. And it's a lot like older European countries in a sense that it's quite boring in a very good way. So the government works, you know, taxes get paid, very little corruption. And most, you know, things are already done. So what appeals to me in South Africa and in other emerging markets is that there's so much to do. I can have a truly, large impact personally on the economy, on the population. Also, the way that we build the company, finance it, it just creates the kind of knowledge and experience that isn't in the country yet. So that's what motivates me.
Thanks. Julia, I know you have to rush off soon, but before you do go, what are you seeing as the areas of opportunity that are standing out for you as you look around the investment landscape, as you bring this relatively new concept of revenue-based financing into the country along with a few other players? What's standing out for you?
I have a wonderful job because I get to see some of the most inspiring opportunities and deals in Africa, and those are in South Africa. And so we often get the question around why South Africa, why not expand into Pan-Africa? And we will do that, but there is more than enough opportunity in South Africa. We're seeing growth stage businesses that are highly tech-enabled leave their operations and creating jobs in South Africa, where the rand goes a long way for those operations, and expanding into new markets. So we spend a lot of time with our founders helping them to get into markets in the US, into Europe, expand their sales strategies, and they're doing incredibly well on the global stage while keeping operations and jobs at home. And so that's one of the key opportunities that we are seeing in our portfolio. We see a lot of venture capital that's starting to accelerate within the South African space. We're seeing accelerators, VCs, debt providers, MES providers, all working together. So not only a deepening of the funding environment, more players coming into South Africa, but also the sense of broadening, where across the spectrum we have players working together to provide these companies with the right types of capital as they go through their growth spectrum. We're seeing a lot of talented founders setting up in South Africa. They see South Africa as the gateway into the continent. We've got a great banking and governance sector in South Africa. In many cases, the systems that enable entrepreneurship work very well. And so we're seeing enormous amounts of impact and commercial returns in the South African environment. From a linear perspective, we've already seen sort of 80% of our deals have exited successfully. We're seeing strong IRRs. We've got transformed founders. We've got gender in our companies. We're supporting over 4,500 jobs, farmers. So the impact and commercial nexus in South Africa is really exciting.
Philippe, you've had a lot of experience in a lot of regions around the world, and you're also part of one of South Africa's biggest success stories when it comes to telecoms, and Vodacom, now part of the Vodafone Group. How is your pretty big organization thinking about opportunities within the country? Where is it looking to? Where is it looking to invest? And what are the areas?
So I landed this morning from South Africa, and I landed in South Africa 3 days ago from Ethiopia, where I had the pleasure of being part of a crew that launched our biggest investment so far in Africa, which is the launch of Safaricom Ethiopia. It's an 8.5 billion investment, which is quite massive. Why am I talking about that? Because we tried a new formula. Vodafone, Vodacom have been used over the last 35 years to essentially go at it alone. We tried new formulas, etc. And then we realized a few years ago that if we really want to do the entire transformation that we want to achieve, we have to work with much more partners. And we started looking for who could be very, very strong partners. And it was fascinating to me to see not only that you find very, very strong partners abroad who want to invest in South Africa notably, but you also find very, very strong partners in South Africa who want to invest more into the country. So, on Thursday we celebrated this launch. On Friday we brought some of the investors with us to South Africa back. On Saturday we signed new contracts. I can't already tell you what we're going to work on, but again, the key point is what is very interesting for us as an investor from this side of the globe is that you do find an incredible appeal from a number of organizations who want to be part of this. And so that's really fascinating. You don't find that in other regions. So yeah, delighted to invest there. Yeah, quite a few projects on the board, so you will hear from us. You will hear from us.
That's great. Sharon, if I could give you a South African Chamber of Commerce magic wand, what would you use that magic wand for?
Thank you, Stanley. I'm going to just respond to the comment you made a moment ago. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go far and go there successfully, go there together. So thank you for picking up on our Africanness, which is about doing things in partnership and doing things together. If I had to look at a perfect wand, it would take away, as Sam was saying in the previous panel, our own goals. It's about time South Africa stopped doing those and actually started to positively look at earning our goals and not getting own goals. So thank you, Sam. I see you smiling there. What is important for South Africa and for us as a chamber and a magic wand is to take away the fear and the uncertainty, the concern around corruption, personal security, and to allow them to invest more freely, which was one of the things the Namibian crowd talked about in the previous session before ours. Talking to the presidency's investment forum and asking them yesterday as to what does South Africa need. So if I had the magic wand, I would give them the extra 10% of investment capital coming in from overseas, which equates to an additional $50 billion worth of investment over and above what we currently have, which takes South Africa to an investment status of 25% of GDP. And only then will you see the growth that everyone's been talking about the country has not had. So I would like to see an environment that will allow us to up the foreign direct investment to 25% of GDP.
And if I could expand on that and maybe wave my own magic wand, is that a percentage of that would go towards Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which seems to be the least sexy and the least supported of all of them, and yet probably the one that has the potential for greatest impact because it affects all the others and the ability for economies to grow with a more transparent and improved environment of governance and accountability. Eric, if you weren't doing Planet 42, where do you see areas just screaming opportunity your way that you would get your hands involved in?
In South Africa, right? Okay, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, South Africa has, like, okay, the infrastructure, banking services were mentioned and so on. Telecoms, I think, as well. You know, these are at a much better level than in other African countries, other emerging markets. So South Africa, in that sense, in many senses, is a developed economy. It just has a lot of contrasts. But for me, I guess I'm spoiled again, like with coming from Estonia. Like, I don't think the banks work very well, for example. Foreign direct investment, absolutely important. We just closed a $75 million debt transaction, and it was an absolute nightmare because the central bank is the worst in the world. Just the rules and just regulations, how to bring in money. So we can find investors who believe in South Africa. That's actually the easy bit. The most difficult thing is just, okay, like I have this investor wanting to give me $75 million. Like, why do we have to jump through some ridiculous hoops, doing some weird like split interest thing where like there's a guarantee and then some kind of a loop structure and so on. Like it's just, it is really this, South Africa needs to stop doing these own goals, as you said. Entrepreneurs will manage. They are managing right now. They're doing great jobs. South Africa is great new and existing. There's actually a long history of great entrepreneurs in South Africa. Entrepreneurs will figure out how to work, but just it's unnecessarily difficult right now. But we manage.
Given that you guys are the determined attendees while lunch is being served, I'm going to open it up for questions at this point and to repay your faith in this panel. So do feel free to raise your hand and we'll get some microphones around to you. One at the back there. Thanks. If you just let us know who you are addressing the question to.
Of course, thanks very much to you in the panel. I'm Michael Mills. I work for the UK government in placing donor capital into climate finance funds. And we're invested in South Africa and Southern Africa. And we're also involved in the Just Energy Transition Program, which unfortunately I can't talk about, but just to give you a bit of background for my question. Now, as a South African working for His Majesty's government, my question is, given the, not my phraseology, the death spiral of Eskom and the critical impact that lack of power has on your businesses, how do each of the panel members, and sadly we've lost one or two, respond to the unreliable power situation in South Africa? And let's not talk about the situation, we know that's critical. Let's talk about, in an optimistic sense, the answers and how do you see the way forward through the power crisis?
Well, I guess, look, we've done an exercise this year, which is to contact large organizations like yours to say, hey, by the way, if I wanted new energy and I wanted it green and I wanted it beautiful, in 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, what can you offer to me? And because the answer to your question is you need to produce more. You need to produce differently, so you need to bring new investors. What I'm fascinated about since I started working on that question is how many people are willing to put money into this, but finding difficult hoops to actually do it. Which then leads to large companies like the one I work for to say, but if we guarantee that we buy from you, would that make things simple? And the answer becomes yes. So there is a lot of money out there willing to invest into exactly that. What I found equally fascinating is that none of the companies we've investigated so far have been able to immediately tell us what they could make available. And I think, if you know that you have an issue, and if you know that people are willing to buy from you, probably the minimum you could have is like a service card saying, hey, by the way, I'll have X megawatts at this time. And it's fascinating because it's a problem that you see across all countries in Africa. To be frank, it's a problem you see in half of the countries in Europe too, which is it's very difficult to find what is available at what rack price, if you want, depending on the type of length of contract you would have. So compared to other industries, that one is not mature as much. We're trying to change that by working with them on long-term planning and production plans, etc., so that we can rely. Because we can't have stuff working 75% of the time. My antennas, they need to work 24 hours a day, and that's that.
Thank you for your question. If you look at the perspective of the Just Energy from the perspective of available resources, there's lots of sun and lots of wind and lots of water in the ocean, not so much on the land. So there are the resources there to do it. You made reference earlier to the complexity South Africa creates in trying to do business, and a lot of that is around regulation. And the regulation of how much energy you can do for yourself, how much you can put back into the grid, and the relaxing of those regulations, and to what extent those are going to happen over what period of time. You do have organizations, some of the big mining companies, for example, who are just saying, actually, I don't care about the regulation. I'm going to do it myself anyway, and I'm taking all our mines off the grid. Yeah, so that is the other side of the equation where the commerce is taking some of the regulations and the outcomes into their own hands. Your issue is everybody's day job. I've got staff that are in South Africa, and we are hours a day out. Not one of them is in the same region as the other, and yet many times I've got more than one staff member out at a time due to power. So it is going to hold the economy back. It is absolutely critical that the corruption is dealt with. And I wouldn't want Andre de Ruyter's job in Andries de Ruyter's, or Andre, I can't, it's Andre. I wouldn't want his job in a million years. We say presidents get old very quickly in their first 4 years of term in office, or 5 years, whichever it is. I think some people in commerce, particularly him, is going to really take strain because it's not an easy job that he's got. And he's been quite clever in using the supply chain to help hold to account some of his own people internally. But it's a massive culture change that is across the country, across government, across business, that has to change in the country. So it's another one of our good own goals is corruption. It needs to be dealt with. I haven't probably as directly answered your question as well as you did, but I'm hoping that I've given a sense of some of the energy issues.
Yeah, load shedding. I mean, it's directly for us, it isn't really that big of a problem. You know, it's traffic is worse, okay. Sometimes our customers can't, I don't know, authorize debitors, so like, you know, signing of a contract sometimes is delayed and so on. But these are, you know, the kind of direct effect on us is quite small. But of course, it has a massive impact on the wider economy. And I don't even know how to fix it. Well, less corruption, obviously, we can all agree is good. You know, yeah, less regulation on you know, building new generation capacities, which is happening now. That seems to be, you know, the right thing to do as well. But I'm no expert there. I don't know how to fix it. Maybe just from our point. What we have done, and this is since 2020 already, so Planet 42 is certified fully carbon neutral. And we do this obviously because you know, we have internal combustion engine cars, so there's emissions that these cars are producing. But all of that can be calculated, and it is calculated and audited. And to offset those emissions, we are using carbon finance, which in South Africa means that we are specifically backing a wind farm project in the Dar province in the Eastern Cape. So, you know, that's our kind of like small contribution that, you know, we're helping to build more generation capacity that isn't this coal, you know, coal generation plants, which we know that they're inefficient, they're, you know, breaking down, they're not really being maintained. And sometimes, because of corruption, they actually put rocks in there instead of coal, and obviously rocks don't really burn. So, you know, that's a bit of an issue when you're trying to generate power. I don't know how to fix it, but you know, I'm also hopeful that maybe the president does know how to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, the problem at Eskom is a problem that is a crisis of leadership in government, in the ministry. I mean, the ridiculous situation that we have where we have a Minister of Energy and Minerals, like how we combine those two is just, you know, beyond me. But also how, you know, we respond to that, which is obviously we throw as many resources as we can at investigations, at exposing corruption, at looking at how efforts are being sabotaged, how this all is tied in with the fight for the political leadership of the country. And so it's not just a case of operational elements. There's a whole lot more that's involved in that. And we only have a fraction of the resources available to us that we would like to have dedicated to what is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, issues facing our country, which is the energy crisis. Because all of our plans, all of our plans for growth, all of our plans for improving the quality of life in the country for us and the rest of society hinges on having adequate energy supply. So Yeah, we do try and focus and make sure that we have enough of our resources. We had a really great investigative journalist who was pretty much full-time dedicated to that, but he decided to engage in some national service and has gone to Eskom to work as the spokesperson there. So we'll forgive him for that, but at least we know we've got at least one more good guy on the inside, and we'll welcome him back when he does. But we would love to have a dedicated crack team focusing 24/7 just on Eskom and digging into all those things and bringing the stuff to light that we can hopefully help solve the problem, not only at the leadership level, at the political level, but also providing solutions journalism to everyday people in terms of how we can navigate the crisis and how people are doing that and looking at solutions from around the world that we can maybe inform the public and how they can help with that. Yes, sir.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm from South Africa, so I'm taking this opportunity to ask questions on what I think would be important for investors to be confident in the country, something that I think we've touched on: red tape, power issues, corruption. I think those kind of challenges are quite well known. On the other side of the scale, however, I would hypothesize, not even hypothesize, but I believe South Africa knows the solutions to a lot of these challenges, and they've actually been quite progressive in developing policies and plans and so forth. But they've fallen very short on the execution side over the years, right? Why? And I think there's an important point, because investors want to know you're going to do what you say you're going to do, but we haven't been able to do it. In your view, and maybe starting with yourself, in your view, what prevents South Africa from executing better? If I can be that direct.
Again, I come back to a crisis of leadership. I think it starts right at the top. I think we have a peacetime president when we need a wartime president, right at the top. And then some key ministries where we don't have the right people in charge. And apart from that, and I mentioned earlier, the underinvestment in that Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is accountability, justice, and institutions. Our institutions have been eroded, and I liken the fact that if we look at what's happened in even more developed countries like the US and the UK and parts of Europe, their institutions have been around a lot longer than ours, and their ability to absorb corruption and the sort of acceptable level of corruption that can still allow societies to function is purely a function of the time that they've been around and been allowed to operate. Whereas ours barely had a decade before we had this wholesale avalanche of corruption and system erosion that happened. So I think those things combined, we need better leaders, and we also need a greater investment in supporting our civil society, in supporting independent media, in supporting our institutions, because they've played that buffer role from, system collapse and where we are now, which is still a fairly resilient place despite the leadership and the problems that we've had at a political level.
Could I possibly add a slightly dissentful voice? Sorry guys, but it seems to me that we're putting a lot on it's all about leadership, it's all about others, it's all about, I'm sorry, but I kind of disagree. The type of problems South Africa faces are problems you see in many, many places. But to be fair, South Africa, as a foreigner working a lot there, is probably one of the where people say most that it's somebody else's problem. So there is a bit of a pushback onto, I think these things need to be fixed at personal level too, which is, it's an eagerness to do, not an eagerness to be, entitled is not the right term in legal terms, but South Africa has a very, very strong legal system. When you look at London and you look at the UK, at South Africa, they have two very, very strong systems. The big difference is that I don't see many, many people in London doing contracts, essentially preparing for when they will go wrong. They do contracts to do the stuff. And you see a lot of attitude, which I think needs to evolve in South Africa on that, which is, oops, let me prepare myself, brace for the worst. That also has a slowing effect on the pace at which you can do business. So it's really, really, really important. There was 2-3 years ago a huge study about why is it that people come here to do their contracts despite having very, very good legal systems themselves. And one of the main reasons was there, which is here you can't hide behind it. In many other jurisdictions you can, and people do. Again, what I find fascinating is that you see lots of positive energy at the moment, including about investing in South Africa. We just approved a series of new projects where you say, okay, there is a problem, there is a solution, let's try to do the solution. But then you hear a lot also of people around the table telling you, oh, brace yourself because the problem will come. Well, I'm not too sure that this is the right way to do business, frankly, which is if you start on day one by saying it won't work, then go somewhere else. I think we need to be a bit more positive about this, which is there is an enormous potential, there are resources, again, there is money available, get on with it. I have Thomas here in the room, which is from Ethiopia. I mean, he was one of the first people working with us on our mega investment there. And it's fascinating. Ethiopia took the problem exactly reversed. They just went into, okay, what do we need to do in order to attract investors to do a mega investment? And again, the attitude towards the problem, I think, is very, very important.
You're quite right, Philippe, and I look forward to Vodafone's meaningful investment and support of the independent media sector in addressing this problem. So we've been given the last the wrap-up bell for a couple minutes left. If there are any questions, we can take one more in front. Yeah, Mike.
I just wanted to, sorry, my name's Mike Kushner. I'm from Kerry Olsen. I'm from Cape Town originally, but I'm based in Jersey now. I'm a regulatory lawyer. And not to gang up on you, Pierre, but I really do think that there's a structural issue, and I really do think that at the heart of these issues, regulation is the problem. Just to track through really quickly the ones we spoke about. Look at power, look at new capacity generation. What's the issue there? Regulation. Look at financial services. I made this point to Stylie earlier. Very few of us have spoken about it, but South Africa, imminent grey listing. What are financial service providers doing about that? How are you getting ready for it? And at the heart of this, I think, is regulatory problems. You mentioned South African law. I'm a South African lawyer. I've practiced there. Why do people come to London? Because English law is certain. They know they'll get a just result out of the courts because there's an arbitration system here that's existed for 800 years. So there are very, very good reasons structurally to do business in England, but you've got really, really good people in Africa and in South Africa in particular. But you need that regulatory framework underneath it. You need support from the top, from government leadership to actually get stuff done and to scale. Sorry, it was more of a comment than a statement.
I think one of the challenges that business in South Africa has is they have the energy, they have the knowledge, they have the desire, they have the innovation, and they are not able often to materialize their dreams in many ways. I mean, if you look at the one of the statements that Brand South Africa talks about, that South Africa has a trainable and a willing young workforce. It also has the largest unemployment rate in the world, I think, or close to it, not quite. So we have so many positives and there are these negatives. One of the things I do in my day job when I'm not chairman of the chamber is I actually lecture on corporate governance, and I see the corporate governance lady at the back there as well. And we talk about the bias in decision making. If you start to the point you made a moment ago, that if we start with a negative perspective that infuses into everything in that business, and all decisions thereafter are at risk of being off the back foot for the wrong reason, the wrong emotions, and that downward scale and spiral is such a negative force in itself. And I think a lot of business, because of their frustration with getting things done, are sitting in that position rather than doing what the Trade Minister has talked about is getting rid of the red tape, and I'm not quite sure when he plans to do it, but he's talked about it often enough. Get rid of the red tape, and we'll go into a positive spiral of business being able to deliver for itself and therefore employ people, train people, all the things that need to be done. But the one thing I do want to mention that South Africa has done extremely well is deal with a lot of the demographic issues that the country has had to have. We have got a complete change in our demographic, middle class, upper class, working class. It is incredible when I look at racism and gender or ethnic diversity issues. We've got a bigger issue here in the UK than South Africa has when it comes to dealing with diversity. It's far more Rainbow Nation than the UK will ever understand. So it's got so much going for it. If we could just get that upward spiral going, and we'll leave it to all of us to solve the problem.
Eric, last comment.
Yeah, I think you should run for office, mate. I mean, you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's corruption. I think there is a crisis of leadership. But I mean, who's gonna fix it? I have a great excuse. I'm not South African. I can't run. But it is up to South Africans to ultimately solve it. So and again, I don't want to, like, I know I've been talking about negative things, like, you know, we're trying to find the issues that we can solve so the country can improve. But obviously, I'm still in South Africa. I could have gone anywhere in the world. I went to South Africa. Among, you know, I mean, aside from anything else, it's the most beautiful country in the world. People are great. You know, it's absolutely wonderful. Also for business, I mean, we've done really, really well. It's just that it's a little bit, you know, tougher than it should be. But, you know, what's the saying? Like, we tell what we must, so yeah, we get it done.
The wonderful thing about South Africans, when you go there, and you've been here for a while, is you land there. First, you can smell Africa. The other one, that's the sort of positive, you can smell the earth. And the other aspect is everybody smiles. I just so love that aspect of South Africans.
And on that note, I think we can all head to the lunch line. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you.